All right, folks, welcome. Welcome to our special Halloween edition of Earth Day Every Day. Thanks for joining us this evening. I am Michelle Backus with Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Middlesex and Union County, and I'm going to introduce our speaker in just a minute, but there's also with us on the panels Amy Rowe and also Steve Yurjo, both with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. So give me a minute or two just to go through some of this basic stuff about our webinar series. But Rutgers Cooperative Extension is the outreach arm of the university. It's a partnership between the counties that we serve and the university, and every county in the state except for one has an extension office, and we provide science, research-based information and programming to the public. So the purpose of this webinar series is that we started this back in the spring when we wanted to help folks understand and help them take steps to protect the environment at home. What can folks be doing, small steps, small things that people can be doing at home to help protect the environment. And we are thrilled that so many people have been interested and have been part of this program with us. So we are running Earth Day Every Day in WebEx. And many of you I know are familiar, but for folks who are with us for the first time, first of all, you should let us know in the chat box if you're with us for the first time. But you can ask questions via the chat box. There's also, you'll see something called the Q&A. We'll see your questions if you put them there, but we prefer if you put your questions in the chat box, and feel free to ask questions whenever you want during the presentation. You do not have to wait to the end. So again, the chat box is on the lower right-hand side of the screen. You are all muted. You should be able to see everybody's questions, but if for some reason WebEx is off tonight and you do have the ability to unmute yourself, please do not. Please don't unmute yourself. This recording will be available on our Earth Day Every Day website, so you'll be able to listen and share it afterwards. Also, there is going to be a poll at the end of the presentation. About 10 minutes before we end, I'll open up the poll, and don't forget to submit press submit at the bottom when you're answering those questions. And if you would like this week, especially if you've been with us for a while, or if you're just with us for the first time, our director would love it if you would provide a testimonial about how the Earth Day Every Day series has helped you. If you would be willing to maybe, write some lines about how you feel about this program. If you liked it, we would love to hear about it. Also, I want to let you know that in this presentation there's 2 instances of pictures showing dead animals. So Evan wanted to let you know if that is a trigger for some people. It's nothing gory, but we just wanted to let you know if there are kids there, or if you have issues with that there are 2 pictures of dead animals in the presentation. We also wanted to thank people who have donated in the past to the Environmental Stewards Program, and at the end I'll talk to you some more about donations. All right, without further ado, I'm really very thrilled that Evan Drake is with us this evening, and he is a PhD candidate working with Brooke Maslow with the Rutgers Wildlife Conservation and Management Program, and he's going to be talking to us this evening about demystifying iconic Halloween animals. So animals like bats and ravens and snakes, why did these animals become associated with Halloween? He's going to be talking to us about that. Thank you, Evan, so much for being here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Sure. What about, there's that slide after this. Is that?
Oh, the consent. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So before I turn it over to Evan, you're going to see this question in the poll. We have to ask for your consent. Rutgers now considers you all human subjects. And that does not mean that we are going to come and poke and prod you, but it does mean that we are going to ask you some questions. And it also means that in about 6 months, we're going to follow up with you to see how you're doing and if you adopted any of the practices that we talked about in these sessions. So this is the language. If you have any questions about the research study, please reach out to actually Amy. And in the poll, you'll give us permission if you're okay with consenting to take part in that research study. Okay, and now I will turn it over to Evan.
All right. Well then, ladies and gentlemen, babies and elephants, welcome. So tonight, just some introductions aside, here's me. I'm a bat researcher here at Rutgers University, but that's pretty much where I'm going to cut that introduction short because that's not who I am tonight. Tonight, I will be representing the scary, the unfairly scary. And my plan here, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to take these animals that have been labeled scary, sometimes deservingly, sometimes not, and I'm going to try to take the things that make them scary and flip them, try to make them cool, rebrand them a little bit, give their image a facelift. So I'm going to start by explaining why they're scary, how they came to be associated with Halloween, and then I'm going to try to flip that image. So stick with me for that. So let's meet my clients for tonight. Bats, of course, my bread and butter. Owls, snakes, vultures, spiders, and crows. Now, of course, there are other animals associated with Halloween. The one that everybody keeps asking me about is black cats. But I'm going to stay away from domesticated animals tonight, if that's okay with you guys. And there are also animals out there who have been labeled scary, sometimes for no good reasons. But like sharks, for example, those aren't associated with Halloween, so I'm not going to cover those either. This is what I'm working with. So just a little bit of a background on Halloween. It's actually kind of a mush-up of a few different holidays. You have some European Christian stuff, like All Saints' Day, and you have some influence from more older pagan stuff. And you also have from Mexico the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. So when all those meet, you get what we in North America call Halloween. It's got influence from a few different sources, and we've sort of made it our own by, So what I thought might be kind of neat is to go to these places where Halloween's origins sort of rooted from and introduce you to some of the animals that may have inspired the original Halloween. So from Europe and Mexico, let's take a look at some bats. Now, fun fact about vampire bats is that while there are so many species of bat in the world, only about 3 of them actually suck blood, and they are all in South America. So a bat that you might find in Mexico is the common vampire bat, which I begrudgingly admit is a little bit cute. And here we have the European free-tailed bat. So these are some animals that may have been around to inspire Halloween, and because, especially considering here in New Jersey, you don't see bats flying around at the end of October. So sometimes I often wonder, how did bats come to be associated with Halloween if they aren't particularly active at Halloween time? Well, in Mexico and some parts of Europe, where it's a little bit warmer at this time of year, bats are still very much active. Here is a European and a Mexican example of an owl. The eagle owl is large and beautiful, and then you have the Mexican spotted owl, kind of on the smaller, cuter end. And here we've got spiders are a pretty diverse group. You've got a more typical web weaving spider that you might see hanging in your attic or your house or outside in the common or the cross orb weaver spider. And then you also have those tarantulas, the ones that they like blow up to gigantic proportions in old horror movies. Those are always fun. Common pets too. And in terms of crows, here in North America, the largest member of the crow family is the common raven. And their range extends all the way from up here and throughout America and Canada, all the way down to Mexico. They get around. And over in Europe, we have the carrion crow. Carrion as in, dead things. Snakes, these are fun. The Mexican king black snake, which makes it actually a pretty popular pet because it's sleek and black and cool. And then you have the European adder, which is venomous. The Mexican king snake is not venomous. It's a little more on the safe, harmless side. In terms of vultures, here's one you might know well. On the right, we have the turkey vulture, which, again, much like the common raven, really, really widespread. Here in New Jersey, you can see that way up there, hovering around, just soaring, not really flapping too much. And then over in Europe, we have the griffon vulture. They have some similarities. That bald head, the darkly colored body, big. So what I'd like to do is warm up with a little bit of a matching game, all right? So this is going to work with some Venn diagrams. And if it's been a while since you've worked with Venn diagrams, I know I haven't touched them much since like grade school, back when they were a fun little exercise for us to do. But how this is going to work is you've got two categories, and where they meet in the middle, they have characteristics from both of those left and right categories. So let's start with which ones are diurnal and which ones are nocturnal. And I'll give you a second just to mentally arrange those. Okay, let's take a look. Now, of course, on the right, you have your nocturnal species that are bats. Okay, to be clear, there are diurnal bats, but those are big fruit bats, and typically not the ones we think about with Halloween. I'm talking about, if I want to get specific, they're called microchiropterans, but that's not important. They're the little bats that come out at night. That's the ones I'm talking about for this presentation. And owls. And then in the middle, spiders and snakes, depending on where you are active throughout the day and night, depending on which species and what the climate is. And vultures and crows, because they rely heavily on sight, they're much more commonly out during the day. And in general, of these two descriptors, nocturnal things tend to register a little bit higher on our scary meters. So what I'm going to do is, with these little Venn diagrams, after I point out which ones fall into which category, this is really getting at why we consider these animals to be scary in the first place. Things that come out at night are typically scary, because night and dark are scary things. Now, some of these are predators, some of them are scavengers. I'll give you a second. All right, this one might be a little bit quicker for some of you. On the left, we have our predators. Yes, predators of bugs, that also counts. Still technically a predator. So bats and spiders are predators. Crows are a bit more generalist, and vultures, while they will take care of weakened animals, they're much more heavily on the scavenger side of things. Doesn't have to be all the way dead, just mostly. And they're all kind of scary. All those things, they eat animals, dead or alive. Predators and scavengers kind of give us that feeling of, ugh. Now, here's one that may or may not surprise you. I'll give you a second. Which one of these animals are safe? All right, let's take a look here. Here we go. In general, if you come into close contact with a spider or a snake and you get bitten, whether or not you think it's venomous, on the safe side, go to the hospital. With spiders and snakes, it's often smarter to assume that they're dangerous and then be pleasantly surprised afterwards. However, if you see a vulture, an owl, or a crow out flying around, you're probably not in any danger. No worries. Bat, though, I placed in the middle for a very specific reason. Same thing, if you see bats just hanging out outside, you're in a good place. Don't worry. But bats have been occasionally known to get into your house, and sometimes people panic and try to grab them and throw them outside. That is not the thing you want to do, because if And I know this is kind of a hot topic right now, but bats are known to carry some diseases, including rabies. While it is rare, they do carry, a small percentage of them do carry rabies. So again, if you are bitten by one, please go to the hospital. And I know I've been getting a lot of questions lately about bats and this virus thing that we're all aware of. I'd like to remind everybody that there's still no definitive evidence that it originated from bats. All the official peer-reviewed literature out there studying the topic is still pretty inconclusive. I checked pretty recently. So, dangerous things are scary, for good reason. Now, which one of these are a little bit more apparent than the others? Give you a sec there. Maybe they're good at hiding. Maybe they're not. All right. Bats, I know from trying to find them myself that they are sometimes a pain. It's one thing if it's sunset and you see them just flying around as it's still a little bit light out. That's always very convenient. But if you're really trying to find them in the middle of the night, oh, how annoying. They're so hard to find. Owls, too. Even during the day, they're quite hard to spot. They really kind of nestle into a tight spot in a tree, and they just close their eyes, stay still, and they blend right in. Snakes especially are famous for that, being hard to spot until you accidentally step on them. Then you're in trouble. Spiders, they're hidden mostly because they're small, and their webs are often very sneaky. Hit me in the face when I'm walking through the woods. You don't see them until it's too late. But vultures and crows are pretty conspicuous. You're gonna see them if they're present. And it's that unknown element that if something is hidden, it's there, but you can't see it. That, ooh, mysterious. That's a little bit scary. Now, here's one that might surprise you. Some of these animals are symbols of death. Some of them are symbols of life. All right, I'm going to go ahead with this one. Yeah, so as it happens, depending on the culture, all 6 of these animals are symbols of death. Somewhere in this world, when people think of death, they think, oh, owls. So bats and snakes are a little bit special, though, because in some cultures, they are also considered symbols of life, fortune, luck. Bats, in, for example, China, the character used to write bat, it's the same character that means luck. So people in China actually often believe that bats represent good fortune, luck, longevity. Snakes, due to their nature of shedding their skin, and they're long and they kind of continuously grow, they are also said to represent rebirth, life, good health, that sort of thing. It's kind of a neat thing to look into. You don't often think of that sort of thing given where we live, but in other cultures they really see them differently. And surprise, surprise, symbols of death are a little bit scary. Now here's a controversial one, but these are mostly formed by, of course, objective peer-reviewed opinions. And I place them into these categories. They can almost all of them be both cute and ugly. And I want to apologize to the crows and vultures of the world for singling you out, but I'm sorry, I just couldn't find a single cute picture of a vulture or a crow. They're just shifty-looking characters. Look at that. Even as babies, they're not particularly cuddly. I can do nothing for them, and I feel terrible. Bats, however, I'd like to take a minute and go through each of the other species and show you ugly and cute pictures of them, because it's become a personal hobby of mine to zoom in really close on bat faces because they're so ugly. I love it. On the left here, we have a bulldog bat, and on the right, you have a ghost-faced bat. And I am hard-pressed to even tell you where the mouth is on that right figure. It looks like You know when Bugs Bunny is sticking his fingers into the shotgun of Elmer Fudd and then the thing blows up like a banana peel? That's this bat's face. That's kind of what it reminds me of. It's just a mess, and I love it. But not all bats are like that. You do get cute bats. Look at that. The big eyes, the clean white fur, the little ears. I like them. I like them a lot. They really run both ends of the spectrum, ugly and cute. And spiders, gut instinct is to go, ugh, gross. I mean, look at the big butt on that big black one. Got the red spots that tell you danger. And then you've got that left one. That one looks fast. That looks like the type that if you get too close, like scares away really quickly. And that always freaks me out. Or even worse, maybe it jumps. Who knows? But they can also be cute. That one on the left has a smiley face on his butt. How great is that? And here on the right, you have two examples of peacock spiders. Look at their little shiny eyes, and they're holding up their arms, trying to get attention, probably trying to mate, but that's not the point. They're cute. I like them. They're a little bit fuzzy, too. That's even better. Owls can be a little bit gross. They look a little bit like Muppets, don't they? Especially the babies. Look at that thing. Oh, they go through that weird, awkward teenage phase that birds do, but they're there for a while. So they're not always the most charming characters, but sometimes they are. Look at that. That is a saw-whet owl in the top. That is an adult. That is a fully grown owl, and it is precious. And on the bottom, those are burrowing owls, and they're just like little bird meerkats. And they hang out on the ground, and they hang out in groups, and they're all buddies, and they're really cute. They have big, bright eyes, and I love them. Snakes. Snakes always have sort of a knee-jerk reaction from people because they are inherently creepy, but they sometimes can be a little bit cute. Look at that. They've got shiny big eyes, and they look like little cuddle worms. Who knows? But vultures. I'm sorry, vultures. I couldn't make it work for you. Anyway, so to recap, what makes them scary is that they come out at night. They eat other animals. They can hurt you. They are dangerous. They sometimes remain hidden. They are symbols of death, depending where you are. And they are ugly. Again, sorry, vultures. Now, to some extent, we can blame that on pop culture. We are constantly being drip-fed these images of these animals in movies, TV, stories, that sort of thing. And we're, to some extent, being made to believe that they are scary. Bats, for example, get hit pretty hard with vampire culture and that sort of thing. And in old movies, they've got blood-sucking bats going right for the neck. That is not accurate. Bats rarely go to humans. Very few of them suck blood. And when they do suck blood, they do not go for the neck. That is a dangerous place to go for. They go for somewhere a little bit more hidden, out of the way. Even on livestock, they normally go for the feet or ankles. This is a man named Ozzy Osbourne. He did a thing to a bat on stage, and it was considered pretty hardcore back then. A little bit of satanic underpinnings, who knows? I'm not going to go into details about that. But they do get some positive media exposure a little bit, Batman. But even among superheroes, he's a little bit dark. He's a little bit scary. Bats, in general, are portrayed as scary. You get very few like, oh yeah, that was a positive role model bat in that movie. That doesn't happen a lot. Snakes have it worse, as hard as that is. But going back to biblical references here, there's of course that snake that tempted Adam and Eve. And in some churches today, they handle live snakes during the service because they believe that snakes represent some kind of evil devil type character. And by handling these live snakes and not getting bitten, they claim that it is proof of their faith in God, that it is protecting them from these snakes biting them, which is, if that's what you want to do, sure. And they are staples of bad sci-fi movies. Have you ever flick through the Sci-Fi Channel and they love these sort of low budget effect snake movies? They're always fun. Give them a good watch. It's worth it. If you like Sharknado, stay tuned for some snakes. And even the more famous snake movies don't really paint them in a good light. It's you never see the snake as the hero, pretty much. Spiders do get a little bit of a good press going on. Between Spider-Man and Charlotte's Web, everybody's middle school summer read, you get some positive spidery images here. But for every good spider, there are a lot of not so great spiders. Like, do you remember that giant spider from Harry Potter that very politely sat you down and explained that it was going to feed you to its children? That was a bit much. It was very gentlemanly about it, of course, but bottom line is you're going to die. And no horror movie scene would be complete without a creepy attic full of spiderwebs. Their very presence in a room always has that kind of spooky feel to it. They leave webs behind and, oh, now I'm scared. Owls, again, sometimes they get some good stuff going for them. They're often seen as wise and smart and helpful, right? But really, no scene would be complete at night without them. That's from The Wizard of Oz, if anybody's trying hard to replace those. They were a real creepy scene. And if you see scenes like this, you can almost hear that image, where it probably sounds a lot like hooting from, I have a sound file. It's probably, if you can hear it, it probably sounds like this. Did that play?
I didn't hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, anyway, that was a great horned owl, and it was like, whoo, whoo, whoo. So when you see dark nighttime scenes in movies, there's almost always some owl horror movie ambiance going on. Then crows and ravens. Who remembers that little family-friendly romp where a raven sort of broke into someone's house and then psychologically tormented a man until he went crazy? That was Edgar Allan Poe, where he just sort of, a raven came in and talked until the guy freaked out. That was fun. And there's also other crow sort of a B or C list movies out there and books of crows coming in and not doing some friendly things. A group of crows is called a murder of crows, by the way. And then here's a scene from The Birds. I don't think it's the original. I think this is one of the sequels. I don't remember which. But crows hanging out on a playground by a school with a bunch of kids, and they're not there for snacks. So crows are often seen as menacing, ominous, and when they gather in large numbers, it's never considered a good sign. Same thing can often be said of vultures, and the classic thing we think of when we think vultures is them circling above some poor unfortunate life that's about to be snuffed out on the ground, normally a desert or something like that. And in movies and such, they show up, but they're never really like people you root for. These ones they weren't particularly harmful, but they also weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. They were people to look up to. These are the vultures from the Jungle Book. You also have the vultures from Snow White, which were a little bit shady. Look at them just sort of sitting there menacingly, looking like they've got death on the mind. And then who remembers that scene from Ice Age where the vultures did a lavish musical number about how they can't wait for you to die so they can eat you? That was nice. Now, like any good politician or campaign manager or PR guy, let's see if we can turn that around and take all the things that made them scary and try to make you like them. Because all these things are pretty cool.
Evan, before you do that.
Yeah.
So with bats, for example, you mentioned earlier a bat gets into your house, it may potentially bite. Do all bats bite?
Well, all bats have teeth. So
yeah.
if you do try to bare hand one, it's going to try to defend itself.
Right.
But bats aren't going to come after you. There's that old wives' tale about, oh no, bats are trying to get my hair to lay eggs. Two problems. One, bats are mammals, they don't lay eggs. And two, they don't go after humans. You're big and scary. They're probably going for the bugs that are flying around your head. So if a bat seems like it's following you, it's a coincidence. And I guess the answer to that is any bat may bite if you try to handle it,
Okay.
But they're not going to come to you looking for a fight.
Okay.
Even rabid bats often die of the disease before they transmit it. Like it's not a fun time for them either. They don't really get aggressive. They just come out in the daytime and they're confused.
Okay.
Yeah. So all these things that make them scary can also make them cool. Except the ugly thing. I'm not a miracle worker. I can't fix ugly. Let's ignore that for now. But let's look at the other 5 things. Those can be fun. So what makes bats cool? They are unique among mammals for a few reasons. One is, guys, their wings are their hands, right? That's kind of neat. Look, I've numbered their digits. Those are their fingers. Their wings are actually supported by their fingers. Unlike the flying squirrel or this thing called the colugo, bats are capable of powered flight. The only mammal group that is capable of doing so. These squirrels and colugos, they can glide, sure, but they can't flap their little skin flaps and gain altitude. How high they can go is limited from how high they can find a thing to jump off of. Bats, however, can flap. And you can see that these flying squirrels and the colugos, you can see they have little hands, and then they have skin stretched between their arm and their leg. But no. For bats, the wings are their hand. It's not like they have hands and then, oh yeah, a wing. They're one and the same, and that's neat. That is neato. Bats also really do a lot to depress the bug population. There's been a study done by Boyles in like 2011 or something that it's been estimated that bats save farmers about $23 billion every year. That is combined of, okay, let's say the farmer has a real bug problem and the bugs are eating its crops, and now the farmer can't sell as many crops. Yeah, that you're not making as much money. And bats eating the bugs would help that situation because now I get to sell more food because less bugs ate my food. But it also applies to farmers are now saving money because they don't have to apply as many pesticides because bats are around eating the bugs. Echolocation. I could give a whole lecture about echolocation, and in fact I have. It's super cool, and the more I learn about it, the more I want to talk about it, but I'm going to try to keep it short. When bats sort of make that call, they if you're not familiar, they see by yelling at the top of their lungs. And when they do, that wave of sound radiates away from them as a sphere, and it hits, let's say, a moth in the night, and that echo bounces back at them, and they get just a small fraction of what they originally shouted is what gets deflected back to their ears. And they use that to determine location. And there's a whole neat history about that and how humans discovered it, and there was a whole World War II thing because that's when humans were just developing sonar technology to detect submarines. And everyone was freaking out because, oh no, bats did it first. But that's a topic for another night. My research actually involves setting out microphones at night and recording bats as they echolocate and fly around. And this is what that looks like on my computer. That is a sonogram, and each one of those little blue lines is a bat shouting. And that bottom axis right there, this whole recording is 3 seconds long. And you can see how many times that bat yelled in 3 seconds. They echolocate very frequently, and it's really mind-blowing. But what happens there? What is that? I'll tell you what. Because when a bat echolocates, it's like its brain is hitting refresh on its perception of the environment. You can only see as many times as you shout. And when a bat is closing in on a bug, it needs much more up-to-the-moment information about what's going on around it. Because that bug is moving fast, it is small, and it is trying to get out of the way. So you need to hit refresh very frequently so that you are sure to get that bug. So if I zoom in on that, you can see that each one of those little fuzzy lines there are separate calls. And at the peak of their call, right before they're about to hit a bug, bats can hit frequencies where they are calling once every 5 milliseconds. That is 200 calls per second, and that is insane. Hollywood films are shot in 24 frames per second or something like that, just to give you a reference. bats hit a level of resolution that we can only dream of in short bursts. I have a little bit of a recording. The sound has been acting up a little bit, but I'm going to play it for you and see if you can hear it. Fingers crossed. Here's what it sounds like when I slow it down by 10 times. Did you guys get that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Neat. Yeah, that little drum roll there, that was the bat. We call that a terminal buzz, actually. That's the bat closing in on the bug. Oh, oops, I didn't mean to play it again. Okay. And bats are super diverse. There are about 1,400 species of bat and counting, actually. And on the left here, that is a full-grown bat. That is called the bumblebee bat, and is the smallest bat on Earth. And on the right, that is a golden crown flying fox with a whole banana stuffed in its mouth. Those things are big. So you get a whole range of sizes, and they're very widespread, and they're second in diversity only to rodents among mammals, anyway. They're the second most diverse group of mammals. Anyway, moving on before I get too caught up in bat world. Spiders. Spiders produce this special silk where I did a little bit of research into the peer-reviewed academic literature to learn more about their spider silk for this presentation. And what I found was, not only are they're neat. Where are the very large bats found? That golden crown flying fox was from the Philippines. And I hear in some parts of the world, people eat fruit bats. So, anyway, spider silk. That's what it looks like, and it's really pretty. And sometimes it gets dew on it, and it's awesome. But it is also insanely strong. And you don't really have to read too much into the red letters up there. I just did a little bit of unit conversions and math. But the point is, spider silk has a breaking strength. So if I held spider silk in my hands like this and stretched it until it broke, the force required to do that is about 21,000 psi. And if I'm interpreting that correctly, that is one square inch of spider silk. So imagine that you had a thread of spider silk that was that thick. All right? If a giant spider made a rope, a string that thick could support something about 21,000 pounds. That's roughly what that translates into. And they get real creative with their webs. They do all sorts of neat shapes, and it's awesome. I could do a whole other slideshow just on cool-looking spider webs that I found on the internet. Similar to bats, they also play a hand in bug control. Mosquitoes, mayflies, whatever. If they're hanging around your porch, maybe consider keeping them around. They could be a good thing. And even more so, if you have them in your house, maybe consider letting them stay there for a little bit. Maybe you've got one up in the corner of your ceiling in your bathroom. Maybe let them stick around because they could be catching any bugs that you miss. Something to think about there. Here's something a little bit haunting, where I thought this was fake when I first saw it, but that is a spider in Texas that has caught a bat in its web. Yeah, that one took me a while. I thought it was fake until I saw the video, and I thought, that's real. That's just a big spider or a small bat, or both. But yeah, that's neat. And not only do spiders eat things, but things eat spiders. They're actually a pretty important part of newborn bird diets because they're high in a nutrient called taurine, and they really help nestling growth and development. So mother birds feeding spiders to their chicks is a pretty good thing. They're part of the food chain, is what I'm saying. Snakes. Snakes are like a giant muscle. All right, imagine a very flexible bicep slithering around. They're really just one solid, strong man. Here's a study that I was checking out for this presentation. I did a little digging here too. And this was a study about how strong snakes can squeeze. Here are two constrictor species, reticulated python and Burmese python. And that black line in the middle, I added that. You know what that is? That's about 35 kilopascals. And that is how much it takes to crush a human windpipe. To be clear, you could be strangled with a lot less force. That line is crushing your windpipe beyond repair, like your breathing tube no longer sucks in air. That's pretty fatal. So, again, you can be strangled with something a lot weaker, but a snake, only about, about 10 centimeters in diameter? That's about 4 inches. A 4-inch thick snake could crush your windpipe if you let it. Don't let it. Snakes, much like bats and spiders, also contribute to controlling pests. I'm not going to show anything too graphic of their hunting process or their eating process, but suffice to say that sometimes rats and mice can be quite pesky. They can spread disease, they can get into your food, they can poop everywhere and spread other disease. So snakes are a pretty good way to control such a threat. And snakes have some pretty cool camouflage. They can be hard to see if they're not moving. There's a snake in that picture. This one might not be too hard to spot because it's sort of like dead center. Here, all right, so let's go through in order. Here's one blended into leaves. Here's a snake blending into some rocks. Here's a snake blending into some tree bark. Can you see that one? That one's a little bit harder. That one's in the middle there, slithering up. Here's a snake blending into some leaves with its weird sideways eyes. I love that. And snakes, just like what I just showed you, those 4 pictures, I think you get the sense that they're pretty diverse. But that didn't do it justice. I need to show you more. Because there's a snake for every occasion, every outfit. Here is a big old anaconda. Huge, huge snake. And here's a little tiny cute one that fits in your finger, little palm of your hand. So they come in lots of sizes. And you've got sea snakes. You've got snakes with little rattles. You've got snakes that live in trees. You've got snakes that live in the sand. You've got snakes that live in the caves and eat bats. You've got snakes that are kind of thorny. And you've got snakes that can flatten out their body and glide through the air like a flying squirrel that I showed you before. You truly have a jack of all trades. Like I said, it's a snake for every occasion. What else could you ask for? Land, sea, and air. They're like the Marines. So, owls. Let's move on to owls. They've got these crazy feathers where, you ever hear that owls can fly silently? You ever hear that little tidbit? Well, it's because of their weird flight feathers where if you zoom in real close on the feather of an owl, the tips, they're not straight lines. They're not smooth. It's like their feathers are made of little cones. And that sort of allows them to flap at night and not really make any noise. So when they're closing in on a field mouse or a meadow vole, they do so silently. And bats, sorry, I'm stuck on bats. Owls, they do this little thing. They've got a weird skull. I don't know if any of you know this one, but let me show you. Their ears are not symmetrical. That is an owl skull, and you can see that one ear is higher up on its skull than the other one. That is for a very specific reason. So, Michelle, can I ask you, is there a little box of me up in the corner where you can see me speaking? Can people see me?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So we, as humans with nice symmetrical ears, I can tell the direction that a sound is coming from due to the small difference between when a sound hits this ear versus when it hits this ear. If I snap, I know that it's coming from over here because this ear heard it first. But that is not as useful for up and down. I can't tell the difference between up and down because that symmetrical is hitting both ears at the same time. But owls kind of solve that by displacing them, one a little higher, one a little bit lower. So now they get the best of both worlds. As they're flying around, they have they're on both sides of their head, so they still get the, oh, it's coming from over there thing. But now they also get vertical direction. Now, depending on which ear it hits first, they know if the sound is coming from either beneath them or above them. And that's neat. And among birds, they're a little bit different because, okay, there are birds of prey out there. Owls are not special in that regard, but there are very few nocturnal birds of prey. Very few birds have the wherewithal and the equipment to hunt at night. Some birds live at night. Some birds sort of make their little calls at night to mate, but not many actively go out and hunt. And that's neat. Between hearing and seeing, owls were really well equipped for hunting at night. And owls, they can do the head thing. Do you know the head thing that I'm talking about? They can do the head thing. Look at that. Their necks are super flexible. That is a barn owl doing its thing. Here's another one. Not a barn owl, but a different owl. Woo! Yeah, that's creepy. I love it. Huh. Owl bodies are weird. You really think that they're kind of chubby, but they're mostly just feathers. And when you lift up all those feathers, you can see that they actually have really long legs. Owl bodies are just full of lies, and it's really fun to learn about. Between their ears, their legs, and their necks, it's always something new with these people. Those little fluffy tufts on the top of this one's head, those are not ears. I don't know why they're there. They're just like little decorations, but that's not where its ears are. Crows. This one's actually kind of neat. When I was researching for this, I learned stuff. So crows are actually quite smart among birds. They have been known to use tools. And not only do they use tools, they can teach other crows to use tools. And they pass that along in some kind of weird crow culture. And it's sort of said that birds or these crows get that sort of intelligence because of their early developmental stages. And I'll talk about that in a second. It's actually a neat little theory. But crows are smart, and I'll more on that in a second. They are generalists. They can do or eat pretty much anything that other birds can, whether it's fish or insects or leeches or worms or mice or bird eggs or the birds themselves or corn or acorns. And as you can see in the middle picture there, it's eating a burger. So they're really they're going for trash and everything else in between. And believe it or not, crows are actually pretty silly. They play a lot. Here's a bird, or a crow rather, just sort of hanging out in the snow, making little snow angels for no other apparent reason other than that it looks fun. That's not a survival instinct. It's not feeding or anything. It's just having a good time. Here's a crow doing little roly-polies. And what I was talking about earlier is that crows, it's been hypothesized that, you know how human babies are kind of useless for a few years, where we can't really do anything and we're just kind of like objects that you have to feed? But in return, we're really smart when we grow up, right? And on the flip side, animals that maybe develop quicker, they're maybe not as smart. Like chimpanzees, they're a little bit more independent a little bit earlier, but they're not as smart as humans. It's been hypothesized that crows stay a little bit more childlike. They stay younger and a little bit more irresponsible, and they stay in that little fledgling phase a little bit longer. And because they take a longer time to develop during what we'll call childhood, that sort of helps them develop their brain power for when they're adults, and that's partially why you can attribute their intelligence to their little crow childhood. So they're playful. They're kids. They're giant, or not giant. They're small flying kids, and they take advantage of that. That's the theory anyway. Vultures. Vultures actually, they're good guys. Deep down, if you dig past the gross face, they're good people. Vultures really help cycle the nutrients through the ecosystem. They take dead and dying things and they clean it up. you'd be surprised how many raccoons or possums or deers on the side of the road are really helped along by the vultures. During a normal decomposition cycle, it would take microbes and other small decomposers about 4 to 6 months to completely break down a deer from flesh to bones. That's a long time to be having a deer hanging out on your property or in your yard or on the side of the road. And it's going to be an unpleasant sight for a long time. But now take vultures into the mix and set a group of vultures loose on that thing, and they can pick a deer down to the bones in about 2 days. That's really helpful. You don't really fully realize how great of a thing that is until you got to deal with it yourself. And it really helps bring all that energy, all those nutrients back into the food system, the food chain rather, a lot quicker. And kind of like the crows, vultures are kind of smart. Here's a lammergeier, and they eat in a pretty special way where they like to eat bones. As you can see right there, it's kind of choking on a bone. Well, what they like to do is if a bone is too big for it to directly swallow, they will pick it up, fly real high, and drop it on a rock or a hard place and shatter the bone, and then eat the fragments. It's a pretty complicated behavior. It's pretty close to using tools. I mean, it's not directly tools, but they are smart. There have also been other birds known to leave nuts on the road and wait for cars to run them over so that it cracks the nuts for them, and then they eat the nuts. It's kind of like using a tool, but not really. And vultures, I know I made some jokes at their expense about being ugly, but it's for a reason. That bald head, it's not a coincidence that most vultures have that sort of featherless, hairless, bald, ugly head. It's because they really need to get in there and pick around and eat the dead and dying flesh. And if you stick your entire head into a dead deer, you're going to mess up your feathers. So most vultures have adapted a featherless head to get in and out a little bit more cleanly. And not only are they well adapted in terms of their feathers, but their digestive system is crazy. They have such an acidic stomach, and they have such an efficient digestive system that they can dissolve bone. Their stomach is very acidic and they dissolve bone, but also their stomach acid is so strong that it kills diseases. You know that deer that we used as an example that died on the side of the road? That might also be a nesting ground for all sorts of nasty diseases that could get out into the environment if left unchecked. But if a vulture eats it, any disease that was hanging out in that deer dies in the vulture's stomach. They just take in diseases and poop out sunshine, for all I'm concerned. They do a good thing. They clean up not only in terms of smell and the way it looks, but they also clean up in terms of health, and they get rid of disease. They eat diseases for lunch. Now, that's all well and good, and I know I've definitely convinced you about how cool these things are, but let's say at the end of all that, you still might not want them in your life or in your house or in your yard. And I respect that, I suppose. So let me give you a few little tips about how to get either more or less of these animals in your area. But before that, I believe we're about to do a poll thing, right?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Folks, I'm gonna go ahead and open up the poll, and you have about 20 minutes. You can take your time answering those questions. And you also, if you have questions for Evan, you can put them in the chat box. But I'm going to go ahead and open up the poll. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah. Am I running a little bit long, by the way?
No, you're doing okay. You have about 6-7 minutes left.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, I'm gonna keep talking then while you guys are taking the poll.
Yes, we're not ending the presentation or just giving people time to answer the questions.
Cool. All right. So bat exclusions. I have to put this in there because my lab does these exclusions. It's kind of a shameless plug for the Maslow lab, but here we go anyway. If you have bats in your attic, let us know. We'll come by and I'm going to skip through some of this text because I'm going to say it anyway. But So bats, if they live in your attic, we can install a one-way device where the bats can get out, but they can't get back in. So what we do is after we seal up the hole that they were going through, we set up a bat box. And so that way when the bats are trying to come back to their little attic-y nest spot, they can't find their way back in, but then they go, oh, okay, there's a box here. I guess I'll settle for that. So that way you get all the awesome benefits of having bats in your life without the consequence of having bats in your house. Doesn't that sound like a dream? Let us know if you have bats in your attic. Without further ado, let's move on. If you're looking for a more natural way to help bats, if you have a dead tree in your yard, consider not chopping it down immediately. Unless it is a direct threat to your house or family, maybe let it stand for a little bit because there are a lot of animals, bats included, that benefit from living in dead trees. On the left there, that is an example of some nice peely bark where bats really like to nestle in under the bark that's peeling away from the tree, and that is especially good stuff on dead trees. Dead trees have peeling bark, and that's what bats like, among other things about dead trees. Snakes. If for some reason you find yourself with a severe lack of snakes and you want to fix that, my advice would be to litter some loose rocks around your yard. They like that sort of thing. Anything that would provide a hiding place, whether it's piles of rocks or piles of firewood, as long as you've got some empty negative space in there for them to get in and hide, they like that, especially if it's in the sun. That's just good stuff. Not only rocks and wood, but if you've got dense vines, like good ground cover, they also really appreciate that. Certain invasive species, like mile a minute, certain snake species have been known to take advantage of that. Also, Virginia creeper fits the bill pretty nicely too. And if you have livestock in the area, oftentimes when you feed your chickens corn, that will attract rats and mice too. And then the rats and mice will attract snakes. So if either you have chickens or your neighbors or something, you live near a farm, be on the lookout for some of their loose feed attracting rats, and then the rats will attract the snakes. That's something to look out for, something to consider. So in general, snakes need somewhere to hide, somewhere to get sun, and some prey. If you've got those three things, it's a pretty good chance you'll get snakes. Vultures, this one's not as cut and dry. They like to hang out in these big groups, whether it's on a tree or on a roof or on a car. They're a little bit creepy. They hang out in gangs, and they'll mess with your car. They'll poop on your car, and sometimes they'll even poop on power lines. And as I mentioned, their stomach acid is super acidic, so their poop is also super corrosive. So whether it's on your shingles, on your car, or on a power line, it could really get some expensive damage in there. So not many people want vultures hanging around. So I know this is a bit much, but people have found that the most effective way to get rid of vultures is by doing what's called an effigy, where they hang a dead vulture from a tree. And surprise, surprise, if vultures see a dead vulture, they don't want to stick around that area because they think, oh no, it happened to him, it's going to happen to me next. So they get out of there. It's also been shown to be effective with fake vultures. That's what that thing on the right is. It's not a real vulture. It's just something that they did to make it look like an effigy, but it's not a real bird. So that's what you do if you want to get rid of some vultures. Owls. Owls are kind of nice, and they're not as destructive. They're good guys. And if you want owls, what the ideal thing is, you want to have a tree next to an open field, somewhere where they can perch and look out and listen in the night over an open field, because what they like to do is hunt these things called meadow voles. So anywhere that they can get a good vantage point, like a nice tree to perch in that overlooks a field, that's a good place for them to hunt. So if you've got something like that in your area, you might have owls. And when it comes daytime and they want to find a nice place to hide, they like really dense, shrubby cover. A popular thing is cedars, like what's called eastern red cedar. Those get really dense. So if you've got a bunch of cedars that sort of brush up against a nice open field, that's some primo owl real estate. So consider that if you're really interested in owls. Speaking of owls, some people use fake owls to control the crow population. Now, in general, for crows, you really want to get them early before they establish a habit of coming back to your house or property, because once they get used to it, they're not going anywhere for a while. So what people often do are noise deterrents, where they play sounds of hawks and predators that scare away the crows. But the thing is, crows are smart. So they've been known to recognize patterns. So these crow deterrents randomize the sounds so that the crows never get too used to what's going on. Do crows or ravens talk? In novels, yes. I don't actually know. I don't actually know for sure. That's worth a Google. Not me. Sorry. To deter them from perching in your gutters or on your roof, same thing with pigeons, set up some spikes. I know it's not the most classy way of doing something, but spikes have been shown to reduce the amount that they perch there. And if they're really getting into your porch or something, consider setting up a net. Those have been known to be pretty effective. And crows have actually been known to recognize faces and hold grudges, which is a little bit scary. So if you want to pick a fight with a group of crows, be sure that you'll win first, because if you don't, they might take it personally. And last but not least, I want to talk about spiders. Not much to say here, other than if you're really tired about the cobwebs, there are commercial products where if you spray them on the cobwebs, it will sort of dissolve them and get rid of them, or you can just go in there with a stick and go, like cotton candy, and remove it yourself. And probably the best thing to do for controlling the spider population is control your bug population. If there's no prey in your house, no spider's going to stick around for very long. So clean up your crumbs, clean up your spills, and get rid of any bugs that live in your house, and you probably won't have much of a reason for a spider to stick around anyway. And on that note, you guys have been awesome, and I welcome any questions, or if you guys want to chat about animals or whatever, I'm here. I like to talk about that sort of thing, and happy Halloween.
Evan, that was excellent. That was excellent. We have some questions.
What's up?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my video to start, which doesn't seem to want to. Oh, there we go. One is, I don't know if you asked this already. Do vultures have eyelids or eyelashes?
Ooh. Yeah. I don't know about eyelashes, but they do have eyelids.
Okay. That was a question in the Q&A.
Yeah. Is it because they want to close their eyes before they're reaching their head into a? Is that what the question is about?
They didn't specify. Okay, another question. Can you give an update on the white nose syndrome for bats?
Oh yeah. So that hit in about 2006, and in some populations, we're seeing evidence of evolutionary rescue, where the surviving bats only survived because they have some level of tolerance to the fungus. So pretty much it killed all the bats that were not going to survive the fungus, and the ones that are left have some measure of resistance. It's sort of like when you don't take the full course of antibiotics.
Right.
The surviving bacteria are a little bit stronger for it. So the fungus didn't finish the job, and the surviving bats, even though there's not many of them, they're coming back slowly but surely. That is, for some populations, that is the case. I can't speak on all of them, but there's been some research in my lab about the fungus itself. And there's also some work being done because we found out that it's very sensitive to UV light. So there's been some research by a guy in my lab named Bobby. He's a cool guy. He has been taking these UV sanitization things into caves where the bats sleep. And the thinking is that if you use the UV light to sort of sweep the room and sanitize it, you can sort of clean the cave for the bats while they're out for the summer. And then when they come back in the winter, it's clean.
Excellent. Okay. Some more questions about bats. How do I contact the Rutgers Bat Project? Regarding setting up device for a hole in attic to let them out, but keeps them out.
Okay.
I guess this person wants to get rid of the bats in the house.
Yeah. That would be the Rutgers Cooperative Extension. Mm-hmm. The person you'll look for is Kathleen Kerwin. If you'd like, I can post a link to that website.
Yeah. Why don't I get that? I know where that is, and you can. I'll continue to give you questions that are coming in while you're answering. Another question: do I need to put anything in a bat house to attract bats to stay?
Well, the thing is, what you want is to have a few different chambers in that bat box, so that they're nice and small. Bats are weird. They are small themselves, and they really like to squeeze into very tight spaces where they feel nice and nestled in. So just make sure the space in the bat box isn't too big, because then what happens is wasps might move in. If there's too much space in the bat box, you're going to get wasps rather than bats. So there's plans online that really specify how big the interior needs to be. But in terms of putting anything, it's not like you're trapping a rat where you need to put a little bit of cheese in there to attract it. I think it's just sort of, now to be clear, there's really no good way to attract bats to your bat box. It's not like a build it and they will come sort of thing. You might have to give it a year or two before they find it.
Okay. Another question: what variety of bats live in New Jersey?
Oh, we have 9. Some of them are very rare, though, and endangered. The most common ones that I see around are one that is called the big brown bat, which is not a very creative name. You have the big brown bat. You have the eastern red bat, which is kind of cute. It's orange. You have the hoary bat, which is kind of a frost-colored thing, and it's very widespread. You have the silver-haired bat, which is all black with just a little patch of silver hair on its back, like a little gorilla. You also have the little brown bat. Again, not a creative name. But those are some of the species that I was talking about before, where we're actually seeing evidence of evolutionary rescue. That's some of the research that my professor, Brooke Maslow, is doing. So you got to mix. Those are the most common ones. You also get evening bats in the southern part of the state, and in caves you can sometimes even get the eastern small-footed bat. They are more rock specialists. You might not see them in trees or houses. Rocks and bridges.
Okay, a lot of our questions are bat related. How effective are the bat houses that are out in a field? You'll see, in like a wildlife management area or something like that, people putting up bat houses. Should they be up against a house?
Actually, yeah. So what we've done in our lab is we've kept track of the bat boxes that we've set up personally and how often those bat boxes get occupied by bats. And what we have found is that overwhelmingly, if you set up a bat box on a pole or on a tree, they don't like that. They like it to be on a building. I think it has something to do with the heat retention. So houses are big, they absorb a lot of heat, and especially if you set up the bat box on a side of the house that gets morning sun, they like that. They really, anywhere that bat box is going to stay warm. Even in the summer, they want to be hot. It has something to do with how they raise their pups. They need a nice warm environment. So in general, what we found was that I think it was only about 3% of bat boxes that were in trees or on poles got occupied.
Wow, okay.
On houses, you get a much better chance.
Okay. That is good to know, because a lot of energy gets put in by scout troops and lots of volunteers who are looking to do the right thing and putting up bad houses, and if they're not effective.
and their poop makes really good fertilizer, so if you set up a bat box above your garden, now you're rolling in it.
Yeah,
that's going to be great.
Yeah, that's true recycling right there.
Pest control and
fertilizer. There must be a fact sheet on that. Okay, well, that's a lot of the questions that I am seeing. If folks have other questions, then go ahead and put them in the chat box. I see the poll. People are doing a good job. If you haven't already answered the poll questions, please go ahead and answer those. You have about 3 minutes left.
How many people showed up? That was fun.
Yes, I saw close to 60. I wasn't really looking, but at one point I saw close to 60. Steve and Amy might have Steve says 62. So
me?
Yeah, better than the 3 people that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
I am going to keep the poll open, and I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for joining. Oaks, if you're listening to the recording, thank you so much for listening. Stop the recording.